Alright, so in this video we're going to talk about a very important trading subject, and that is the cumulative delta and how you can use that in your trading strategy. So let's get right to the topic. Before we talk about the cumulative delta, we have to understand what the delta is. So to put it very simply, delta is just the difference between the buyers and the sellers. It's not a complicated topic to understand. That's exactly what delta is. So to give an example here, let's say we have a price level where we have 200 buyers and 200 sellers, and at that time on that price level the delta would then equal to 0. And a cumulative delta is, as the name suggests, a cumulative number where all the previous deltas are added together, and that is what gives us the cumulative delta number. So then the next question is, how can we access this cumulative delta? Now it is a part of order flow, and order flow typically is under some kind of a subscription. You have to pay for it. I don't know any trading platforms that offers order flow tools for free. There might be some, but I don't think they are very high quality. If you want to use the best tools, you'll have to pay. And that leads us to the next topic, which is our cumulative delta chart here, which I have made specifically for this video, so we can talk about the cumulative delta and how we can use it in our trading. And I'm going to give some practical examples too. So if you're interested in how I made this chart, I will put this as the last part of the video. So the last part of the video is the tutorial on how I made this chart. So everyone who's using Sierra Chart and other platforms can maybe take some settings which maybe you didn't think of, or whatever. So before we get to the topic, I want to explain what this chart is. So this is just a normal range chart on the instrument which I trade, so the MES, and we have here volume profiles specific for each day, and then below we have the cumulative delta here. So we have the normal price action above and then the cumulative delta below. So as you can see, I've now made the cumulative delta chart much bigger starting from here. So anything below that is the cumulative delta chart. And now let's look how we read the cumulative delta. So as you can see, for example, here and here and here, the cumulative delta on this chart always resets at each session. So when the new session begins, the cumulative delta also begins at 0. And this is a very important setting to have on, because previous days cumulative delta is, in my opinion, kind of irrelevant, because each trading day is its own session ultimately. And you can see here that the cumulative delta has two ways to go. It can only be positive or it can be negative. So if we take the example of today, we can see that cumulative delta is negative. It is below 0. So it can either be negative or positive. And you can see on this chart that I have actually made the 0 have its own line, and it is for this very purpose. So the line at the 0 is there to show us very clearly if the delta is above or below that. So it just makes it a little bit easier to read. And then I have also added two different lines on both sides. So looking at the positive now, we have 5,000 and 10,000, and the same applies for the negative side. And the reason why I have put these lines here on the chart is that this is a very good gauge on how strong the delta is. So a delta that is between 5,000 and minus 5,000, or depending on which direction price is moving to, is I would say still quite a weak delta. And when price goes above 5,000 or below negative 5,000 all the way up to 10,000, then we are talking about very strong delta, meaning that there's not really any opposition on the other side. So here we can see in this example that we have negative 10,000 delta. So that means that the sellers are significantly more in control than the buyers. And this can be seen very clearly with the price action. You can see that the price has been going nowhere else except downwards, and the delta shows us exactly the same picture. When price is going either way above 5,000 or way below 5,000, we're talking about very strong delta. So when price is staying somewhere in between 0 and 5,000 delta, we're still talking about not that strong of a delta, and this can be a very important context when it comes to placing a trade. So let's now talk about what the cumulative delta can be used for. And in my opinion, the cumulative delta should be used as an intraday tool. It is not going to give you any important context. It is only to read that day's market. And you should really look at the cumulative delta before you trade and while you are monitoring your trade. However, it is still important to realize that cumulative delta, in my opinion, is a secondary tool. There are more important and more, let's say, useful tools than the cumulative delta. It is a very good tool. I'm not saying that it's not a good tool, but there are better tools in my opinion. So the cumulative delta should really only be used as a secondary tool. It doesn't give you context, and you also shouldn't place your trades based on what the cumulative delta is saying. It should only confirm your bias or show you some red flags. I don't know if you saw my footprint introduction video, but there I discussed some red flags you wanted to look out for before you placed your trade, and some of them had to do with the cumulative delta. So I recommend you go watch that video. So what does it mean when I say that the cumulative delta should be used as a secondary tool? I'm going to give a practical example now to kind of help you understand what I mean. So let's imagine now that today cumulative delta has gone up, right? This by itself, this cumulative delta going up, doesn't necessarily mean that you should buy the market, okay? That's what I'm trying to get at here. If the cumulative delta is telling you something, you should filter it through your own context and your own bias. And now let's imagine again that, in this specific day's market, let's imagine that we wanted to sell that market, and we can see here that the cumulative delta is confirming our bias. So this is how you should really use a secondary tool. If the secondary tools which you look at are confirming your bias, there is a very good chance of your trade going right. This would be a very clear confirmation for you to place your own trade based on the cumulative delta. So how do we now apply this cumulative delta chart into our own trading strategy? And I'm just going to minimize the chart here. So you can see now that the cumulative delta chart is quite small. And we also have the volume profile here on today, and this is now today's market. And I'm going to bring a second chart here. So here on the right, we have the footprint chart, and I actually made this in one of my videos. It's a footprint tutorial video. If you're interested in that, go check it out. In my opinion, this is the best footprint in the markets. So it's a very good video I made. And this is a very good way, in my opinion, on how to use the cumulative delta chart. So you can see here that it doesn't take that much space to be able to read the cumulative delta chart clearly. What were the two important things when it came to reading the cumulative delta? Number one, which side is the cumulative delta on? Is it positive? Is it negative? You can see that even if it's this small, you can very clearly see, because we have the zero line here, you can very clearly see where the cumulative delta is. And the second thing which I told you about was the strength. So 5,000 is one line. If you go above or below 5,000, that is a signal of strength. And then you have 10,000, which is, pretty much like absolute control in one side. And This is today's market. I didn't pick any random days. You also see that in many trading YouTube videos, the people use very specific days to make their points, but this is today's market. So I'm actually doing this on the fly. And this is very interesting. You can see here, this is what we would call sideways. So you can see here in the bigger chart that price really isn't going anywhere. It's almost like price is resolving around these two levels here. And you can actually see this same thing happening on the CD. And I like to call this sideways. And this is just one of those days when there really isn't any clear trades to take. Now, if you're a scalper, then maybe, but I'm not a scalper. So if I was trading today and the markets looked like this, I mean, it looks like there was one trade maybe to take here, right? You could have bought the market here and had your targets right there. But then again, that's only about 20 points, not a big move. So today is actually kind of a bad example to use in the CD here. All right, so now we're going to go over a very important topic when it comes to discussing the cumulative delta, which is called the delta divergence. Now, what is this? So to give a very clear example on what the delta divergence is, let's imagine that this is price action. Okay, so price is going up and we have our chart border here. Now a delta divergence is when cumulative delta is going down in this case. And again to the opposite way, so price is going down and delta is going up. This is what a delta divergence is. But as you will see soon with your own eyes, in my opinion, delta divergence isn't really that relevant because in my own trading experience, I have only seen it in relevant times, okay? So again, what do we use the cumulative delta for? Before a trade and inside a trade. And I have only been able to see a relevant delta divergence a few times in all of my trading. So I think there are much more important things that you should look out for in your cumulative delta chart than simply trying to notice delta divergences. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, here we have the previous chart and it is now, I made it bigger. So my challenge here is that pause the screen and try to look for delta divergences. Okay, you can see here that it becomes quite impossible unless you really use a minuscule, but at that point, is it really that relevant? Okay, so my challenge here is that you try to find some relevant delta divergences, and if you would be so kind, I want you to put a timestamp on exactly where you saw it. You can see the dates and the times here in the below. So if you actually did this, pause the screen and try to look for a delta divergence and let me know if you find any. But again, in my own trading, now I start my session at RTH. So if there's no delta divergences happening at that time, and there almost never is, so again, unless there is a delta divergence happening exactly at 9:30, it doesn't really matter, okay? It doesn't matter if there's a delta divergence, for me at least, at the end of the day. It only matters if it's there once I trade. And that I can pretty comfortably say, like, it almost never happens. And if it does happen, it is such a minuscule move in the cumulative delta that it's barely nothing, right? It's kind of irrelevant. So when I see traders talk about the cumulative delta, I've actually seen quite a many videos discussing this subject on how you can use the delta divergence as an entry. We are talking about less than 5,000 delta here, So it is never going to be, you know, above a 5,000 where you see the delta divergence. So you're not going to see a delta divergence of, you know, 5,000 contracts. Those are quite rare. Again, I've only seen a few of those ever. So again, if you want to pause the screen and try to look for delta divergences, I'll be waiting for your comments. So to conclude the delta divergence topic, it is an important concept to understand. I'm not saying that you shouldn't learn about it. You really should learn about it because it's very important, and you should also look out for it. But again, in my opinion, it just doesn't happen, almost never. And if it does happen, it's not meaningful, so there's not enough strength behind it. There's no conviction, right? And even if there is a delta divergence happening, so what? We don't place our trades based on the cumulative delta. We should have other ways to create our trading bias. All right, so the second big concept around the cumulative delta is obviously absorption. Okay, that is the second big topic. You have delta divergence and absorption. So if you don't know what absorption is, let's now imagine that this is the cumulative delta. Okay, so this is the 0 on the cumulative delta, and the cumulative delta is going up. Okay, here we have the 5,000 and here we have the 10,000. Okay, so cumulative delta is going way up. It is way strong, like really strong. So many people are buying the market. And then above we have price action. So this is the line now for price action. This is the chart edge. So price is doing this. Okay, it's not going up like it should. It's kind of lagging behind. And this is what absorption really is, when price can't clear the next level. Okay, there's infinite amount of supply and price is kind of lagging upwards. It's really kind of, it's almost like the cumulative delta is trying to drag the price up, but it just doesn't want to go. I think that's the best way to describe it. Price just doesn't want to go. It just doesn't want to move, right? So that's what absorption is. Now to explain absorption, we have to understand the depth of market. So this is the depth of market, the DOM. I also made this in one of my videos. Go look out for the DOM tutorial. Now you can see here that because the markets are moving, this can be quite hard to read. So I'm going to take a screenshot of this and then we're going to look at the screenshot. All right, so this is the screenshot of the previous market and I'm going to go over this very fast. So if you want more detailed explanation, watch my price action video. There I go into more detail on how you can read this and how price action actually works. So just to give a very quick summary, in the middle here, we have the market orders on both of the sides. So we have the buy side here on the right and the sell side here on the left. And on the right side, we have the passive sellers. So these are limit orders. And here on the left, we have the limit buy orders. All right. So in order to understand absorption, we have to understand, in order for price to move into any direction, I'm going to use the upwards direction now as an example. And again, we're going to go through this very quickly. So if you don't understand, I recommend you go watch my price action video. So you can see here that we are right now at this level, all right? And in order for price to go up one tick, there has to be 70 buyers that clear the level, okay? Each level has to be cleared before price can go up, all right? And what is absorption? Absorption is when there is so much supply, so many limit orders stacked on top of each other that the level simply can't be cleared. Okay, that is what absorption is. I have never heard anyone explain it that way in a YouTube video, so this is really the first time. So imagine that there is, instead of this being 180, this would be 1800. So there would have to be a crazy amount of buyers come in order for the level to go through. And this is what we see in the cumulative delta. So in the cumulative delta, we see all these buyers coming in, but the price isn't going up. Okay, so people are buying the market, but the levels aren't being cleared. Okay, and in order for price to go up, each level has to be cleared. Okay, so that is a very quick explanation on what absorption is. All right, so now that we understand what the delta is from the depth of market, I have again opened the chart. And by the way, this is the next day, so these videos take a long time to make. So if you enjoyed this video, leave a comment, like, subscribe, and most importantly, share this video with someone else, maybe a friend or your father or whoever. Just share the video. The more subscribers I get, the better the videos are going to be, and I'm full of ideas which I want to make into videos, but as a small channel, it's kind of can be a bit hard. So I have found an example of absorption in the CD, and it actually took me quite a while to find this example. So even though I said that absorption is more important to look out for than the delta divergence, and you do see it more often, unless looking at a very minuscule scale, the delta typically is normal, we can say, where delta divergences and large scale absorption doesn't really occur all that much. But I have found an example here, and I think this is pretty clear. This is about as clear as we're gonna get. I'm going to try to find another example too, but what we're looking at is this area here, and that corresponds to this area here. And you can see from the price action that it's not really going anywhere. It's kind of just going sideways, but slightly up. But if you look at the delta here, the cumulative delta, it's very clearly going up. There's no debate. So this would be a very clear sign of absorption in the CD. But as you can see, even it's not really relevant anymore because price isn't moving anywhere. So you can't capitalize this at all. Unless you are in a trade already, then you might want to cut it or just close the trade. But you can see that this happened at the very end of the session here, right? So it's not that relevant. The only times where you really should look at the delta again are before your trade and when you're in a trade, and this should occur very close to the regular trading hours, very close to market open, so from 9:30. So if we're looking at the 9:30 again here, which is right here, the line here is representing 9:30, and there's no absorption, there's no delta divergences to see here. We can just see very normal looking CD, right? And the absorption again happens in the later part of the day when it's not that relevant anymore. So even though I'm telling you these topics, the delta divergence and the absorption, it is very important to understand that these things don't happen that often unless again you use a very minuscule scale where you analyze the cumulative delta bar by bar. Then you can find absorption and delta divergences in basically every level if you really look at it very closely. All right, so I haven't found any other examples of absorption, unfortunately. That is very clear absorption. Now, once you become experienced in looking at the cumulative delta, you're going to see it very often actually, but trying to find examples that are, clear for everyone. But I have found a very good example here on exhaustion, or lagging as I like to say. And we're looking now at this region here, right? The same regions. So right here, okay, this part. And what you can see with price action here is that price drops quite drastically, but the cumulative delta doesn't even break 5,000. And this could now mean two different things. So number one, there could be some buyers that are in there that are slowing the movement down, where the cumulative delta has to count for the buy and the sell, in which case the sellers wouldn't read as strongly in the cumulative delta. Now this is very easy to confirm if we open the footprint chart. I'm not going to do that right now. So if the first case was correct, then you would see a lot of buy side contracts printing on the footprint. But typically when price is going down very quickly, this is a very quick move here, there isn't any buyers that are coming in. And so the second option, which is more plausible I think, is that there simply isn't many limit orders here, so price can break through the levels much easier, and it doesn't take as much volume to bring the price down. Okay, so this is typically what you wouldn't want to see, where price is going down and you've sold the market, but the delta isn't going, below 5,000. And this should make you very cautious when you're in that trade, because if we look at another example, just here on the right, now we're looking at this part here, right? And this delta. And previously we were looking at this and this. And again, keep in mind that we have the zero line here in the middle. It's the black one. Just look at the difference of the delta versus the price action. The price action is nearly identical, but the difference is in the delta. So in the first example here, let's say you sold the market. I would personally be really cautious in, taking the trade off. Obviously, I would let it run to the targets, or, get stopped out or trailed, whatever. But in the second example here, you could very comfortably add to your position because you have this delta strength behind you. But in the first example here, you don't have that. And so when price is going to your direction, but the delta, the cumulative delta, isn't following, so it's not as strong as the price action, I like to call this lagging. Okay, so exhaustion is slightly different. So if we take a minuscule look, so we really look inside the delta and we kind of overanalyze it, which is what many of these videos do. But to make a very clear example here on what exhaustion actually looks like, in my experience, is that, again, if we look at the first example here, but now we're looking at a little bit more. So you have the initial drop, and then you have a slight pullback, and then you have the second drop. Now let's look at what happens on the CD. So CD is dropping, can't break the 5,000. Okay, doesn't come up at all. This could be a delta divergence. So this could be an example of a delta divergence actually. You can see here that price is going up, but the delta isn't going up at all. It's actually still continuing downwards. But as you can see, this is a very minuscule example, and this is, in my opinion, why the delta divergence isn't even worth kind of really focusing on. But if we now look at the second drop, so this drop right here, and we compare the delta strength to the previous drop, you can see that it's it's that small. It's a tiny move compared to this one, even though the price action is about 1/3, but the delta is about, I don't know, 1/10, something like that. And this is what exhaustion is. Exhaustion is when price is still moving downwards, but the delta is extremely weak. But this happens after or in middle of the big kind of move. So to make this point very clear, you can see that the market opens and price is going upwards, and something happens and there's a reversal. You sell the market, okay? Delta isn't there, right? Delta is already lagging. Very bad sign, okay? Now, let's say your target is somewhere over here, okay? This is just a random example I thought of, okay? So your target is somewhere over here, and there's a pullback. You don't really think much of it. Maybe you want to put your stop loss right there, trail it down, and you can see that price starts to head down again. So this is a good sign. And you look at the delta again, but it's not going down at all. And you haven't even broken the 5K line yet. This, in my opinion, is the most clearest example of what market exhaustion is when there's simply there's no strength, right? That's how I like to describe it. The strength of the move is not there anymore. So this typically happens once price is ready to move to the opposite direction. Typically a move ends with exhaustion and then a reversal happens, and you can actually see that here. Once there's exhaustion, it goes to the opposite direction. Now obviously, again, this is not an indicator you can use to trade with. Market context is everything. So a delta that is lagging and exhaustion are both equally as important, and they could almost be described as the same thing, but lagging, I would say, is this portion here, and very clear exhaustion is the later portion because it is the end of the move. So now we have gone through 4 examples, 4 different cumulative delta concepts: delta divergence, absorption, lagging, and exhaustion. Let's go over one more, and this is equally as important, if not more important, than looking out for lagging and exhaustion. This I like to call a reset, and it is when the delta resets to the 0 line. So probably the most important cumulative delta concept is what I like to call the delta reset. Now, out of these 5 concepts, this I think is the most important one, and this happens in almost every session. Maybe not every session, but this happens very, very often, and this is a very reliable way to confirm your entry, okay? And with experience, you can really time your own trades very well by using this simple concept. So we have the delta line here. Let's say the delta is going downwards, and we have the 0 line again, and this is the 5K line, the 5,000 line. Now, I'm going to make it different color so you don't get mixed up, because this is very important that you get this, okay? So price is also heading downwards, okay? And what the delta reset is, that the delta, I don't know why this happens. That's why I like to call it delta reset, because I don't really know what's happening. But what happens is that before price can continue moving downwards, okay, I just made those slightly bigger so I can make my point. So before price can continue moving downwards, what always happens? It goes up. It always goes up before, well, not always. Again, that's why I said that it almost always happens, but very typically it goes up and then it goes down, right? That's how price moves. price doesn't just continue going to a direction forever. So what this looks like in the delta, this happens so often, okay? It's very important that you get this. What happens in the delta is that it goes up to the zero line, or it stops just before it, or it goes very slightly above, okay? But it doesn't go here, it stays very close. So either it goes, very close. Now keep in mind that we are still below the 5k, or above the minus 5k, whatever, you understand. So it goes very close to the zero here, and this is how you use it in your trading. So price is now going up, okay, but your bias is a selling bias. Remember, delta is a secondary tool. Looking at the delta here would mean that you want to buy, right? Delta is going up, price is going up. Why don't I just buy? Oopsie, it was a delta reset, and right after the upwards moves, it freaking plummets down, you hit your stop loss, and then you're thinking, oh, why did no one warn me about that? Well, I just did. So it's very important that you use this concept and all the concepts very carefully, okay? Because looking at the delta alone can give you a very false picture. But if price is going downwards, so you have a selling bias, after the delta reset happens, it just keeps going down. And that's your entry right there. You take the entry when the delta is at zero. And don't be scared, because sometimes it does go above. So you might sell at the black line here, and then price would still go above. Don't get scared. This happens, you're never going to get the perfect entry, but that's why you have to have a fluid stop loss. Your stop loss shouldn't be, the same every time. You need to adjust it to the market, to that day's markets. So this was delta reset, and let's see what it looks like on the markets. And I literally just opened the chart here, and look what's right in front of us. This is what I'm talking about. I didn't even have to search for it. It's right in front of our faces. This is the most clearest example of a delta reset that I can find. Price is going down, delta goes up, price goes up. You have a selling bias, you take the short and you sell it to the bottom. Delta is strong, right? Easy peasy. Well, that's the dream, right? Every day is not that clear. But let's try to find another example. Okay, this was very easy. Didn't even have to move anything. So let's look at this now. So we can ignore anything that happens before, this part. Doesn't really matter. Let's focus on the second part here. So you can see here that price is trying to go up, but it fails. It comes down. It hits some level here. We don't know what this level is. Could be anything really. And then it goes up again. And let's look at what's happening in the delta. You can see this is actually a very good example because it goes to the negative, right? But it doesn't go down. Okay, so this is technically a delta reset. I would say that as long as it doesn't go to the 5k, I would class it as a delta reset. Now, obviously there are some extreme examples. So, in this example, price is going downwards. You can see actually in this part right here, I would say that this is absorption because delta is going down quite quickly. This is a very quick down move for the cumulative delta, but price isn't going down as quickly. I would say that this is absorption, and we can see here that then price immediately goes up. So to conclude it, we can say that the buyers who are in the market right here, and these buyers also, they are now exhausted, and price for whatever reason needs to come lower before it can go up again. And this is what we see in the delta, we can see that here it's not going above the 5k, so it is starting to be exhaustion, and the delta resets and then it bounces up. And this is what I call the delta reset. When it resets to 0 or very close to it, and then it bounces up. This is what a delta reset is. And you know, as you can see, we don't really have to go anywhere. You can see those delta resets everywhere. But a key note is that you should really look for them when you're about to enter. So let's say you want to buy the market and price is going down. You want to wait to see if that delta will come down, and then at 0 you take the trade. But this only works if price continues to go up. So if there's a reversal, then obviously you're going to get stopped out. But you know, those things happen. No strategy is ever going to be perfect, which is exactly why this should be used together with something else. So remember that these concepts are very, very useful and they're very important, but utilizing them alone isn't going to make you profitable. So you really want to apply this knowledge to your own strategy and really try to refine and find something that works, but don't rely on these concepts alone. All right, let's now look at how I actually made the chart which I used in this video. Now, if you're new to Sierra chart, you want to open a new chart. So you come to find symbol and then you pick whatever you trade. I already have mine selected here. It is the MES, and you want to take the newest contract or the one with the most volume and open an intraday chart. Now, even if you don't have Sierra chart, you can still try to copy as many settings as you can from this tutorial, and I think that this will still be a good segment to watch even if you're not using the same platform. So let's come firstly to the global settings, and we want to change some of the graphic settings here on the global. I don't have to do this anymore, but you have to. So if this is your first time making a chart in the Sierra chart, basically the only thing in the graphic settings you want to change is the scale border. You want to make it black. So, and also you might want to set your own fonts here on the chart text so it looks to your liking. And after that we're going to detach. So come to window and then we'll just detach, so we don't have to have that in the background. No. And then we're gonna come to the graphic settings of that chart and obviously take the global off, and we have the last trade price box. This is going to be black, and then the foreground will be white. So those are the graphic settings for now. Then next up we'll come to the chart settings here, and the first thing we'll change is here in the how many days we want to load. You don't need any more than 10. You could probably do with 7 or even 5. Bar period, I'm going to make this a range chart. A volume chart also works very well. Now, if you're not trading the same asset as me, you might have to figure out what is the best range or amount of volume. But I'm going to use, I think, 16. Let's try it with that. And we want to pick here. So the graph draw type here doesn't matter that much because we'll change it to something else later. But I'll put it as the HLS bars now. And then we come to a very important part, which is the session times, and take the evening session off. And this is a very important setting which I haven't really seen people talk about. So here is the time zone, and the way I like to have my charts is that it is in the time zone of the traded asset. So I trade the MES, and that's obviously going to be New York. So that's how I set my charts into the New York time. And in the session start time, we'll put at 6 p.m. because that is the start time for the CME. And then at the end, I'll put at 17. So the session start time is 18 or 6 p.m. and the end time is 5 p.m. So it is 23-hour chart and the evening session is off. Then we'll come to display, and firstly we have the title bar name, and this is something you'll want to do yourself. So I'll just put CD chart and then what I trade, right? Let's make that capital. So there we go. And then here use title bar as a tab label. You can see that it changed there. And then we have the log fill space here. So leave it off for now. And I'm pressing the right arrow now. We just want to add space between the last candle and the edge of the chart. And I like to do this. It just is nicer in my opinion. And now we'll put yes and apply, and now it won't move. So it'll actually stay there. Grid, we'll put yes here and also yes here. And we have the interval type as months. And these settings I put both at months and then 1. And this means that every time the month changes, it's going to make a line. And this just makes it easier to track when the month is changing. And those are it for the chart settings. Now we get to the interesting settings. So come to studies, and we're actually going to take the Heiken Ashi here. So the first study we'll take is the Heiken Ashi, and there's 2, so just take the first one. And you want to change the chart region to 1, so it'll replace the current chart. Then we come to subgraphs, and this is where we actually change the graph draw type. And here we'll put the HL bars, right? And then we have 2 colors which we can change. You can see here that the ones that are visible are the ones that we can change. And we'll make this like some kind of bluish, and the low, we'll make this like orange. Right, looks pretty nice actually. So that's the first study now done. Now we want to add some timelines. So just come to T. And here we have the timeline. We'll add 2. And the first one will be, this will be market open. So when the regular trading hours open, and that is 9:30. So we want to make 1 line for that. And then we want the second line to be when the session ends. So that'll be 6 p.m. right? So now we have our 2 lines. Let's actually see how it looks now. All right, so this is how my chart looks now. I had some technical difficulties I had to figure out. The chart had accidentally changed the period type, but this is what it looks like now. We can see here that we have a lot of lines here, and one is exactly at 9:30 when the regular trading hours begin. This is very important to know so that you can be ready when it happens. And then obviously we have the second line here, which is showing us the overnight, right? So we have the regular trading hours, and then we have the overnight. So let's now come back to the studies, and now we will add the cumulative delta. So we will go up to C. So it is this one. So you have cumulative delta bars and volume. So just take this one. And if memory serves correctly, you don't actually have to change anything in this. Yeah. So the only thing you really have to change is the colors if you want to. And again, you can see the only ones that are really showing anything is the open here. And we'll just change these, Doesn't really matter what they are. And then we have the low. Right, we'll do something like that. Looks pretty nice. Maybe actually the other way around we should do it. So we'll make this kind of a dark. And then this kind of light. Right, and then this one the same. Let's do that. And then, I don't know. You know, mess around with the colors yourself. You don't have to change this anymore. You can if you want to, you don't have to. This is perfectly fine. And you can also try the line on close. This looks pretty good as well. But I'll just, you know, doesn't matter. I like it to be this way. But yeah. So the settings in the CD here are following the chart settings which we have put. So if you put the chart settings perfectly, you don't have to worry about any settings being wrong. And one very important part here is to add the lines. You can see here that we don't have the lines which I had on the previous one. So these are the lines which I'm talking about now. And so the way you actually get that line is that you have to come here to the global settings and you have to customize the keyboard shortcuts. Now this is something you want to take your time with because there's a lot of stuff here you can use. But you come here to the tools, and the one I used is this one. So the horizontal line, and you just want to put your own put it to your own letter or key or whatever so that you can use it. And now that you have your line here, you want to right click and then come to the chart drawing properties, and here you can customize the way you make the line. So you'll want to have the end point price, and it needs to be center, right? So if it's below or above, you can see that that looks kind of ugly. I like to have it in the center, and this color here, this will make it black actually, and line width, I think 2 would be good. And you want to see, now I already changed it. So at this point you want to come to the config, and then you want to save it as a new one. Let's put it here, and then we'll save. You need to give it a name, so we'll just put cum or cd 0 line, you know, doesn't matter, and then save. And then you want to come to the anchors here, and we'll put this at 0. So now we've put it at 0, and then just lastly we need to lock it. So now when we press apply, and when we get out, we can select it, but we can't move it. And that's very important to keep it at 0. And I'm just going to add 2 more lines, both sides. So I'll add one for 5,000 and 10,000 and minus 5,000 and minus 10,000. So now we have our 5 lines here. We can see that we have positive 10,000, positive 5,000, 0, minus 5,000 and minus 10,000. And these lines are very important to read aggression. So if cumulative delta goes below, let's say, minus 10,000 as it has today, that is a very strongly sold market, and vice versa. When it goes above 10,000, on the positive side, there's been a lot more buyers than sellers. You know, these lines just kind of help us read the cumulative delta. And just lastly, coming to studies again, This is the last time, I promise. Now we'll add the volume profile. So we come to VBP, I think, volume by price, right here. We'll press add, and here we have a little bit more settings we have to change. Let's just press apply for now, and you can see kind of how ugly this looks. And actually yours will not look like this because mine has already some settings changed. So the first thing we'll do, we'll actually scroll down and we'll come to right align volume bars, and we'll press yes. And the second thing is the maximum volume bar width percentage, and we'll put it at 10 for now. And now we can actually see what we're working with. It is not taking the whole screen, and it'll be easier to work with. So ticks per volume bar, we'll make this 1. In my opinion, it doesn't make any sense to have 2 or 3 or anything more than that when it comes to volume profiles. You could, but in my opinion, it doesn't make sense. And then here we'll change it to, so we'll put multiple profiles based on fixed time, and we can see here that we have multiple profiles now, and these are right. So time period type for fixed time is days, and then the length is 1, so this means 1 profile per 1 day. And we can actually check this, and we can see here that the volume profiles reset at the sessions. So the new profile starts exactly at 6 p.m. and it ends at 5 p.m. So it's 23 hours again. Now there is an optional setting here which you can change yourself. You can put a different start time here and put yes, and you can make it without the previous day's volume. Or you can change in the chart settings the same thing. If you want to, you can make it start and end at midnight if you want to. But I'm not going to change any of these settings. I don't mind if the previous day comes into here, into the same volume profile. If I want to look at each session separately, that's what I have the market profile for. So then the next thing we'll change is the maximum volume bar width type, and I believe this was automatic when you open the, or it might have been something different, but you want to make sure that this is period length. And we'll actually change the width percentage now a little bit. Let's try 25. I think 25 could work. So I'll keep it like that for now. And then we have always display last profile within view. And I don't know if what you can see what it does, but it basically brings the volume profile to the edge here. And I'm just gonna zoom in a bit. And now when we go back to the chart settings, so we come to the log fill space here again, and we can actually add just enough space so that our current day's candles don't touch or shouldn't touch the volume profile. And putting it back on. So for me, this looks now pretty perfect because, you know, sure, so the previous day's volume profiles are kind of inside the candles here, but ultimately I only care about this day. Again, if I want to look at the previous day's context, I'll look at a market profile, not a volume profile. And then we have some optional settings. So we have volume bars draw method, and you can put anything you want here, really. Any of these I think works. I don't really care, I just leave it at filled, you know, the standard setting. It doesn't really matter for me. We also have transparent draw style. This was kind of interesting. So we put yes, and then we can change the transparency level. And if we'll put it like, 70% transparent, and then we look at how it looks like with the previous days, you can actually see, now we can see more clearly the candles that are within. But again, this is an optional setting, so I'm not going to put that on. I have no problem if the previous days candles are within the volume profile. So I'll just take it off here. And just lastly, we'll change the color a bit. And it is this one here, so volume bars, outline and fill color. And I don't know, let's try that. Pretty nice. Maybe a slightly darker. There we go. I think that's perfect now. So that's the chart right there. Just make sure that your the scale range is a constant range. And if you see this line here, when you scroll to the edge of the chart, we can adjust the cumulative delta chart here. And it doesn't need to be any bigger than this, in my opinion. So when I'm looking at the markets, this is kind of what I'm looking at. Obviously, the CD starts with the 0 always, but if it's going downwards, then I'm gonna scroll it down, obviously. So make sure to use as many of your own settings as you can, especially with the volume profile. There's a lot there you can change. You can put all kinds of settings there. But to me, the other settings are more of a distraction. I don't really need them. This is all I need. You have to remember that each chart has its own purpose. So trying to stack as many settings in one chart doesn't make any sense, because you can just make a new chart and that way everything will look more cleaner. And that's really the main thing I kind of care about when I'm making charts. How clean does it look? Is it pleasing to look at? And if not, then it might be kind of hard to focus when you are looking at it while you're trading. But yeah. Alright, now I was looking through the settings and I found the last settings which I want to change. So these are in the graphic settings. And the problem I had with this chart is that the candlesticks are very thin, and I don't quite like that. I want them to be a little bit thicker, but when you come here to the studies and you come to the Heiken Ashi and you come here and try to change the width, it doesn't actually change. I'll just show you. Even if you press apply, it still stays at 1. And I found a solution for that. So we come to the graphic settings here. And if you change the bar high low down and the bar high low up width to 2, and then you press apply, you can see that now it's thicker. So this is one of the settings which I wanted to change. And the last setting here is this bar close. So I made this black and I put the width to 1, so it's kind of out of the way. And those are all the settings for the chart. So I think that's been it for this video. Very, very long video. Took me 3 days to actually make this video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.